Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send our way, we strip out all the jargon, get past the surface level stuff, and really give you the core knowledge, those surprising insights that, let you shortcut your way to being genuinely informed on a topic.
And today's topic is, well, it's a fascinating one. It sits right at this incredible intersection of performance art, applied physics, and honestly, a kind of cognitive hacking.
It really does. We've got this amazing stack of material here, all focused on the Onnagata. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, those are the male actors who specialize in female roles within traditional Japanese kabuki theater.
And right away, we have to tackle the big misconception.
Exactly. If you're coming at this totally fresh, the immediate assumption, the one almost everyone makes, is that the Onnagata is just a form of, well, cross-dressing, or maybe a really, really good imitation.
A master class in mimicry, something like that.
But the sources we have, they make it crystal clear. That assumption isn't just a little bit wrong, it's profoundly wrong. It completely misunderstands the entire point, the whole architectural goal of this art form.
Right. We are not looking at imitation. That's the first idea you have to throw out.
We're looking at something much deeper. A deliberate, systematic, and frankly, a lifelong process that the sources define as a biohack.
That's the word for it.
The goal here is not to copy a biological reality. The goal is to systematically override the physical, the acoustic, all the limitations of the male body through just sheer, unbelievable technical rigor, all to achieve an artistic ideal.
And that's the critical pivot for our whole deep dive today. The mission is to unpack this Onnagata architecture, not as acting, but as a technical blueprint.
A blueprint for what, exactly?
For the extraction and rendering of the concept of femininity. It's an exercise in pure technical mastery. Every single muscle contraction, every geometric line they create with their body, every frequency they produce with their voice. It's all meticulously engineered.
So we're going to trace that engineering process.
We are. We'll look at it in three phases. First, the physical structure, what's called the hardware. Then the dynamics, so movement and sound, that's the software. And then finally, the ultimate payoff for the audience, the neurological effect of it all.
That framing is so important, the rendering of a concept. You're right, it forces us to just abandon the whole idea of realism from the get-go.
It has nothing to do with realism.
It completely shifts the conversation away from things like costumes and makeup and puts it squarely into the realm of, well, human anatomy and stage physics.
Okay, so let's start with that core architecture. The hypothesis that drives every single design choice here is this pursuit of what the sources call the hyper-female.
Hyper-female, I think that term is so evocative.
It's perfect, isn't it? When you really break down the centuries of training, all the techniques, you realize the actor is aiming to create a synthesized reality. A reality that is, by its very definition, aesthetically more feminine than the typical biological femininity you'd encounter in the real world.
So it's not a copy, it's an enhancement, an idealized, intensified version.
Precisely. And that single goal is what justifies every physical constraint, every bit of pain and effort they adopt.
To really get our heads around that intensity, we have to bring in an analogy that the sources provided, which I think is just brilliant. It's the theory of the simulacra, but seen through the lens of caricature.
Ah, yes. This makes it so clear.
We all know what a caricature is, right?
Mm-hmm.
An artist looks at a person, identifies their most recognizable features, maybe they have a really long nose or a unique hairstyle, and then they just exaggerate them.
They blow them up, make them the total focus.
Exactly. Now, that drawing that comes out at the end, it's not a realistic portrait, not at all. The artist has stripped away all the irrelevant details, all the little imperfections, and they've focused only on those key markers of identity.
And yet, what's the result?
The result somehow feels more like the person than the person themselves. It captures their essence in a way a photograph sometimes can't.
That's the extraction process. The artist performs an extraction. They don't include the distracting details, the skin blemishes, the momentary expressions, the mundane reality of the person.
And the Onnagata is doing that to an abstract concept.
That's it. They are performing this exact same process on the concept of womanhood. They are isolating the specific aesthetic, the geometric, and crucially, the kinetic qualities that have been historically associated with the idealized female form in Japanese culture.
And then they don't just present them, they elevate them.
They elevate them to a state of flawless aesthetic purity, its perfection. And this brings us to the really deep technical reason for why they have to be men and why the training is so unbelievably obsessive. It's all about the sophisticated removal of what the sort is called noise.
Okay, so if the hyperfemale is the ultimate signal they're trying to transmit, what exactly constitutes noise in this context?
It's fascinating how broadly the sources define that noise.
Yeah.
Think about a biological woman performing on stage in that same historical period. She is inevitably an individual person. She has her own personal way of walking, her own modern habits, a unique muscular structure, little tics and ways of carrying herself that might change from day to day. All of that variation, all that personality, it clutters the signal.
It introduces reality.
It introduces a reality which is messy, it's unpredictable, and it's being introduced into an environment, the stage, that's designed for pure artistic transmission. It's noise.
So the Onnagata's whole purpose is to be a clean channel.
A perfectly clean channel. The genius of the architecture is the rigor of the training. It is designed to systematically remove every single one of those elements of noise. The transformation ensures that every gesture, every tiny micro-adjustment of a muscle, every acoustic frequency they produce is refined down to do one thing and one thing only.
Transmit the pure, idealized signal of femininity.
And that process is so ruthless that the actor has to literally engineer away his own biological defaults. I mean, the fundamental ways his male body is wired to move, to stand, to project sound, all of it has to go.
So in that sense, the male body itself is the primary source of noise. Its default settings, strength, breadth, a deep voice, are the complete opposite of the aesthetic signal they're trying to achieve, which is delicacy and restraint.
Exactly. They aren't trying to hide the fact that they're men. That's not the point. They are actively, technically overriding their maleness.
They have to constantly fight against the natural resting state of their own anatomy.
Every second on stage is a battle against their own body.
Yeah.
And that really sets the stage for the physical transformation, what we're calling the hardware hacking. When you just look at the fundamental male frame, it's architected for expansion and for utility.
Right.
If the signal you need to send requires compression and ornament, well, then first you have to perform a radical physical dismantling of your own skeletal presentation.
This is where the applied physics really kicks in, and it's just incredible. So the core challenge seems simple on the surface, right? The typical male skeleton is fundamentally wider across the shoulders, across the hips. It carries a different center of gravity compared to the desired aesthetic.
It's a completely different machine.
So the question is, how do you physically hack that machine? How do you take that skeletal structure and deceive the audience's visual cortex into perceiving fragility and compression?
The first and biggest anatomical obstacle is the upper torso, the shoulders. Men naturally have wider clavicles, the collarbones, and they have thicker, more developed trapezius muscles that run from the neck down into the shoulders.
That classic V shape from weightlifting.
Exactly. That structure creates a strong horizontal line, a T shape, and visually that shape signals masculine strength, breadth. It's the very first piece of biological noise that absolutely must be eradicated.
And the method they use to eradicate it is called the Occamine technique.
Occamine. It literally translates to something like sunken chest or downward shoulders, but it is absolutely not a relaxed slouch. A slouch would just look weak or lazy.
This is an active, engaged posture.
It's a specific, sustained, and incredibly difficult muscular compression. The actor has to physically pull their shoulder blades, the scapulae downward and inward diagonally toward the spine. This action requires constant, extraordinary tension in the rhomboid and lower trapezius muscles.
I'm just trying to do that sitting here, and it's immediately uncomfortable. It feels completely wrong. This sounds less like a position you hold and more like a permanent state of muscular engagement that's actively fighting the natural resting state of your shoulder girdle.
That's because it is.
Is there a long-term physical cost to maintaining this? It seems like there would have to be.
The source material is very clear that this isn't a temporary stance for the stage. It is a fundamental reconfiguration of posture that's achieved over years and years of training, often starting in early childhood. The physical cost is immense. It involves overriding the body's own proprioceptive map.
The body's natural sense of where it is in space?
Your own body's GPS, yes. By intentionally fighting against that wide horizontal presentation, they were aiming to create an almost concave appearance in the upper chest. They're trying to invert the natural shape.
And the visual result of all that effort?
The visual result is the creation of the Onnagata. This is the signature sloping silhouette of the Onnagata. So instead of that sharp, powerful horizontal T shape, the shoulders appear to slope gently downward from the neck, forming a soft, delicate V shape.
It's a geometric line that, on a natural male body, would probably signal injury or maybe extreme passivity. It's not a strong look.
It isn't. But in the context of kabuki, that line instantly transmits the purified signal of aesthetic femininity. It's the first major, persistent structural hardware hack.
Okay, so they've re-engineered the silhouette, they've handled the basic shape, but a performer's presence on stage is also defined by the sheer volume of space they command.
Absolutely.
And if we look at the comparison point, the traditional male roles in kabuki, the tachiyaku, our sources, describe their stage presence as being all about spatial expansion.
The tachiyaku owns the stage.
They perform these large, sweeping, open gestures. They plant their feet wide. They occupy and claim territory, trying to maximize their physical presence across the X, Y, and Z axes of the stage.
It's an explosion of energy outward.
So logically, the Onnagata must perform the exact opposite maneuver, a systematic spatial implosion.
Implosion is the perfect word. The goal is to reduce the body's overall spatial footprint, to make it smaller in every dimension. This creates a really effective optical illusion of smallness, of containment, of delicacy, and it works regardless of the actor's actual height or build.
So if the tachiyaku's movement is expansive and aggressive,
The Onnagatas must be contained, and you could almost say defensive.
so what are the actual mechanics of that? How do they achieve this implosion?
The mechanics are incredibly precise, and they require constant, unwavering attention. There are two main constraints that are paramount. First, the elbows. The elbows must remain tightly near the torso at all times.
Ah, so that restricts lateral movement on the y-axis.
Exactly. Any wide-open arm gestures, which add significant visual volume, are simply forbidden. They're not in the vocabulary of movement. Second, and this is crucial for the z-axis, which is height and depth, the knees must be kept slightly bent and turned inward.
Why inward?
It shortens the natural stride. It prevents the powerful, wide stances that are so characteristic of male movement. The actor is essentially operating inside an invisible, self-imposed box, a perpetual state of subtle constraint.
It's like a constant negation of the body's natural tendency toward efficient movement. You're creating all these physical limitations that your brain had to constantly monitor and enforce. I get the goal of appearing smaller, but how does this connect to creating a sense of form, of beauty, in motion?
That's where the next hack comes in.
This leads us to that subtle geometric trick, the dynamic S-curve.
Right. So the static constraints, the O-commune, the discipline with the elbows and knees, they set the boundary conditions. They build the box. The S-curve is what introduces the element of grace and beauty within those boundaries.
So how does it work? A human standing naturally, especially a trained male actor, tends toward a straight vertical axis, a strong plumb line.
The Onnagata intentionally introduces a deliberate geometric distortion to that axis. It's a complex triple-action move. It involves slightly tilting the head back just a little, twisting the torso just enough to shift the weight off-center, and then allowing one hip to drop slightly lower than the other.
Okay, again, that sounds incredibly taxing to maintain, especially dynamically. It's not a comfortable natural stance by any means. It's a sustained asymmetrical pose.
It is entirely unnatural. It creates constant tension. And this combination of movements is what generates that geometric S-curve that flows down the spine and through the hips. This curve simply does not exist in the natural, relaxed human posture.
It's a pure aesthetic intervention.
Purely aesthetic. It's designed to convey fluidity and a kind of passive dynamism, even when the actor is standing perfectly still.
When I was first reading about this S-curve, the sources immediately drew a parallel to a famous pose from classical art, contrapposto.
Yes, the classic Greek and Roman sculpture pose.
Exactly. The technique used in sculpture to make figures look more dynamic by counterbalancing the weight distribution between the hips and the shoulders. But, wait. If contrapposto is the historical reference here, isn't that comparison fundamentally flawed?
How so?
Well, Western art used contrapposto for static statues, marble and bronze. The Onnagata is a living, dynamic actor moving across a stage. How on earth can they maintain a geometrically precise, unnatural, static pose while walking?
And that is the essential challenge and the beautiful contradiction of the art form. You've hit on the critical distinction. Contrapposto in a statue is a solved engineering problem. The weight is fixed, it doesn't move.
The statue isn't going anywhere.
Right. The Onnagata has to solve that same engineering problem dynamically, in real time, often under the stress of incredibly heavy restrictive costumes, which we'll get to later.
So the body is perpetually held in this anti-natural, tension-filled position.
Perpetually.
Yeah.
Every single forward step requires the actor to consciously adjust the weight shift the hip drop, and that slight head tilt to constantly reestablish the S-curve geometry. It demands absolute, persistent, minute muscle control.
It's like a slow-motion dance with gravity.
That's a great way to put it. The actor is essentially forcing their skeleton to perform an unending, slow-motion dance with gravity, all to ensure that the signal of asymmetrical grace is never, ever interrupted.
Wow. The hardware is constantly being strained just to maintain an aesthetically mandated posture. If the static framework, the hardware, is that complex, the movement systems, the software, must be even more demanding.
They are. Which brings us to the next layer of the architecture.
Right. Let's transition now from that static structural foundation to the dynamic systems, how this engineered body actually moves and sounds. We're moving into what we've called the software engineering phase, which is all about governing the body's interaction with time and space.
And the first component of this software is absolutely critical. It's the simulation of friction.
We're introducing the concept of imaginary resistance, a force that dictates the quality and the speed of every single movement.
Exactly. If we go back to our comparison, the tachiaku, the male rolls, they're defined by low resistance movement. It's quick, it's direct, it's purposeful, and it's aggressively efficient.
Getting from point A to point B as quickly as possible.
The Onnagata must perform the absolute opposite. They have to act as if they are constantly encountering significant resistance. They have to simulate an incredibly high viscosity in the air around them, in the stage beneath them.
The source material gives these really vivid practice metaphors they use in training for this, right?
They're fantastic. The actor moves as if they're walking through dense, thick water. Or another one is they have to move as if they're constantly holding a delicate full sheet of rice paper between their knees, which must not be allowed to drop.
So this imaginary constraint, it's functionally essential. It mandates a very specific quality of motion.
It does. That intentional restriction, that imagined friction, it forces continuous motion. It completely eliminates the discrete, staccato, jerky movements that are associated with efficiency and, well, with masculinity.
But I guess the question is why? Why does intentional inefficiency and slowness translate directly into elegance for the audience?
That's the psychological payoff of this particular piece of software. The constraint forces the body into fluid, nonlinear motion. The joints never lock or snap into place. The transitions from one position to the next are always continuous. They're always softened by that simulated resistance. This high viscosity ensures that movement is never abrupt, never aggressive, and never simple.
Every motion, no matter how small, is rendered into a flowing curve.
And here's the key. The audience perceives the massive effort that is required to move that slowly. Remember, the male roles are defined by efficient movement, getting maximum speed with minimum effort.
The Onnagata is the inverse.
It is the absolute inverse. Maximizing visible effort to achieve minimal, slow, controlled movement. That friction simulation forces the actor to expend far, far more energy to walk 10 feet than they would in their natural, unhacked state.
Ugh.
And this visible, labored resistance is interpreted culturally as deep restraint, as discipline, and as refined elegance.
So grace is born from a constant, visible struggle against the self.
That's beautifully put, yeah.
Okay, so friction is the software that governs all movement. Now let's address the primary acoustic signal. Again, we have a common misconception to clear up. The idea that the Onnagata simply uses a high pitch, a simple falsetto.
Which is completely wrong.
Given the need for a sustained, powerful signal that has to fill a large theater, a simple falsetto would fail. It would be thin and weak. So the solution has to be another deliberate biological manipulation, acoustic formant control.
Right. We have to move our thinking beyond just pitch. Pitch is the fundamental frequency produced by the vocal cords vibrating. We need to focus on something called formants.
And formants are what exactly?
Formants are the resonant frequencies of the vocal tract. That's the sound chamber that sits above the vocal cords, so the pharynx and the mouth. It's the shape and size of that chamber, not just the vibration of the cords, that defines the quality, the timbre, and the perceived gender of a voice.
A simple falsetto, as you said, is high-pitched, but it often lacks richness and projection power. It relies only on straining the vocal cords and often without really using that resonance chamber optimally.
Exactly. For the Onnagata, they need a voice that is undeniably high and delicate, that sends the right signal, but it also has to retain the massive projection power and volume that's inherent in the trained male body. You can think of it as being comparable to a powerhouse tenor in Western opera.
They need both delicacy and power. An acoustic paradox.
And they achieve it by hacking the resonance chamber. So if an actor can learn to physically shorten the length of their vocal tract, they can shift the resonance, regardless of the actual physical size of their underlying larynx and chest cavity.
It's like tuning a wind instrument. You're not changing the reed at the bottom, you're changing the length of the tube itself.
That analogy is absolutely perfect. The key mechanism that's detailed in our sources is the actor's ability to manipulate the musculature surrounding their whole vocal apparatus. Specifically, they do it by raising the entire larynx significantly higher than its natural male resting position.
And they have to sustain that position while speaking or singing.
For hours. Think about the physics of it. When you shorten the physical tube that the sound waves are resonating through, those resonant frequencies, the formants, they shift upward. They get higher.
And this engineered upward shift in the formant frequencies is what produces that high-pitched, delicate, womanly tone that satisfies the aesthetic requirement of this signal.
They are essentially creating and maintaining a perpetually shorter resonance chamber inside their own throat.
And the genius of this biohack is that the engine below all of this, the diaphragm, the lung capacity of a trained male performer, that remains massive. So the delicate sound that's created by the high formants can still be projected across hundreds of feet of a theater.
It's acoustic hyperfemininity. You get the delicacy of a high voice combined with the raw volume of a low voice.
And it's an acoustic paradox that the audience just accepts because the quality of the signal, the fidelity is so incredibly high.
It just reinforces the whole theme. They are extracting the desirable acoustic quality, which is delicacy, and they are rendering it with the maximum possible technical fidelity, which is volume.
So we've established the structural integrity, the hardware,
Yeah.
and we've covered the dynamics, the software. Now we have to move to the interaction layer, the external constraints, and ultimately the final payoff for the audience. We have to discuss how the external elements reinforce all these internal biological hacks.
This is where everything comes together.
It's way too simplistic to just look at the elaborate, heavy kimono and the massive obi sash as mere ornamentation or just a costume. Our sources are very, very clear on this point. These elements function as an active, mandatory part of the system. They are an exoskeleton.
The costume is far more than just clothes. It's an enforcement mechanism, a physical tool for maintaining all the constraints we've talked about. The layering of the kimono is specifically designed to add weight and restrict lateral movement. And the obi, especially, that's the dense, thick band of fabric, it's often tied with these very specific, historically prescribed knots that generate immense pressure around the actor's middle.
So this exoskeleton, it has a purpose.
It has a twofold purpose. First, the overall weight and the layering physically force the actor into a lower center of gravity. This is absolutely essential for that graceful, constrained, viscous movement we were just discussing. A high center of gravity allows for fast, efficient strides.
A low center of gravity forces you to be slow and fluid.
Exactly. And second, I think you can guess, that tight restriction around the ribcage and abdomen.
It's designed to physically prevent the upper body from expanding. It reinforces the Okumune technique, keeping the shoulders down and in.
Absolutely. The tension of that OB physically prevents the actor from defaulting back to their natural, expansive, chest-out posture that signals male strength. The costume is a constant physical reminder. It ensures the body remains locked into that continuous state of unnatural deformation that's required to transmit the female signal.
So without this restrictive interface, the actor's natural musculature would overpower the learned posture almost immediately.
It would. The dressing ritual, therefore, is less about fashion and more about installing a physical operating system that mandates the continuous performance of the core architecture.
This whole theme of removing utility to enhance the aesthetic is it's so fascinating. The entire system seems dedicated to stripping the male body of its functional purpose, expansion, efficiency, strength. And nowhere is this clearer than in the specific case study of the hand. Let's dig into the hand logic.
This is a perfect micro-example of the entire philosophy at work. If you observe the Onnagata's hands on stage, they are never idle. But they're also never functional. The technique is incredibly precise. The fingers are kept meticulously close together, almost as if they're glued. And the powerful thumb is always tucked tightly inward, pressed against the palm or the side of the index finger.
Okay, so let's think about the mechanics of the human hand. It's fundamentally a grasping tool, right? It's engineered for utility, for manipulation, for defense. What is the psychological effect of neutralizing the thumb?
The thumb is the key. The thumb is what gives the hand its power, the ability to grasp, to manipulate an object, to hold a weapon, or to exert force. By keeping the fingers glued together and keeping that powerful opposable thumb retracted, the actor completely removes the fundamental grasping utility of the hand. The hand is symbolically defanged.
It's no longer a tool.
It's no longer a tool. The transformation is immediate and it's incredibly powerful. The hand ceases to be a functional utilitarian object and it is reborn as a purely aesthetic object, a gentle symbolic fan of flesh.
And this serves as a potent, persistent marker of non-aggression, of fragility.
Absolutely. If the hand cannot grasp, it cannot threaten, it cannot perform labor, it is therefore instantly read by the audience as being purely ornamental, which maximizes the hyper-female signal.
So let's recap where we are. We have accumulated this overwhelming amount of technically perfect synthesized data. We have a sloping constrained skeleton. We have movement through imagined resistance. We have a powerful but high formant voice. We have hands that are rendered useless for any kind of utility.
All the signals are aligned.
And this leads us to the final and maybe the most complex payoff, the neurological climax of the entire Onnagata architecture. The sources call it the Henshin paradox, the transformation paradox.
And this is where the audience comes in.
Right. The sources really emphasize that the audience is not being deceived. They are sophisticated viewers. They know the actor is a man, often a multi-generational, highly respected, and sometimes visibly aging male performer. This creates the central cognitive dissonance. The audience knows the biological objective truth, but they are simultaneously observing an aesthetically flawless, synthesized reality of femininity. How does the human brain reconcile this profound contradiction?
This is the absolute genius of the architecture. The accumulation of all these rigorous hacks, the sustained skeletal deformation, the continuous viscous movement, the manipulated acoustics, the ceremonial costume, they all work together synergistically to overload the brain's standard pattern recognition system.
It's like a sensory overload.
It is. Imagine the brain of an audience member as a computer that's trying to process two completely contradictory input streams at the same time. Input A is the foundational long-term memory. I know this performer, actor X, is a man.
That's the fact.
That's the known fact. Input B is the immediate, pervasive, high-fidelity sensory data coming in right now. Every visual geometry, every auditory frequency, every spatial dynamic, every physical constraint I'm witnessing signals perfect, idealized femininity.
So the data contradicts the fact.
And when the technical signal, input B, is so perfect, so consistent, so persistent, and so high fidelity, what happens? The brain reaches a tipping point. It simply stops trying to reconcile the signal with a known biological truth. It gives up. It stops seeing a man performing a female role.
And instead,
it chooses to accept the synthesized, engineered data of the character as the immediate overriding reality.
So it sounds like the audience is actively participating in overriding their own neurological biases. They are willingly submitting to the perfection of the data despite knowing the underlying truth.
That is precisely it. The result is a profound, shared neurological event. It's a consensual hallucination shared between the performer and the entire audience. The actor's technical mastery forces the audience's perception to bypass known fact.
The Onnagata doesn't trick the audience.
No. He technically convinces their senses to override their intellect. The hyper-female simulacra is accepted as reality because the performance architecture provides such irrefutable, overwhelming sensory evidence. That is the ultimate goal and the truly astonishing payoff of this entire system.
So the actor isn't just cross-dressing. He is providing a perfect data set that the brain chooses to accept as the higher truth. Incredible.
It really is.
That was just a stunning exploration of performance as a form of applied engineering. If we quickly summarize the blueprint for this Onnagata architecture that we've laid out, we started with the physical systems, the hardware hacking.
Right, the Occamune technique and spatial implosion.
Exactly. Using those to force the male frame into that delicate, sloping Onnagata silhouette, and thereby achieving a kind of geometric compression.
We move to the dynamic systems.
The software engineering, that's where we discussed simulating high friction to create that viscous, continuous, elegant movement. And of course, the meticulous use of acoustic formant control, raising the larynx to shorten the vocal tract, to produce that powerful yet high-frequency, high-fidelity acoustic signal.
And finally, we brought it all together.
Finally, we saw how the costume itself acts as an exoskeleton to enforce all of these constraints, stripping away all utility-like with the hand logic to achieve the ultimate psychological bypass, that cognitive dissonance that leads the audience into a profound, shared, consensual hallucination.
And the relevance of all this, it extends far beyond the kabuki stage. This centuries-old tradition provides a really rigorous demonstration that an abstract, culturally significant concept like femininity can be treated as a transmissible engineered signal.
It's information.
It's information. It powerfully illustrates how technical mastery, when it's applied systematically and persistently, can be used to entirely redefine or even override biological reality, at least in the mind of the observer.
Which leaves us with a final thought to take away.
It does. It leaves us with a provocative thought for you to consider. If the entire focus of the Onnagata is not imitation, but the rendering of an idealized idea, the hypofemale, what other abstract human concepts could be similarly extracted and rendered through an equally rigorous, technically demanding architectural design?
Concepts like power, maybe, or fear, or even loyalty.
Exactly. And maybe more fundamentally, what does this spectacular and willing human participation in accepting overwhelming engineered data over known, verifiable fact? What does that tell us about the truly malleable nature of our own perception?